Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. It is Friday, December 13th. The time is 1:10 PM. And I call the Mount Vernon Industrial Development Agency regular board meeting into order. If you could please call the roll.
Sure. Madam Chair,
Present?
Treasurer Morton,
Here.
Member Johnson,
Here.
Member Vanderpool,
Here.
Member McDonough. Here. You have 4 voting members and Mr. McDonough is here also, 5 members here.
Okay, thank you.
Quorum. First matter on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of November 14th, 2024. The board members had a chance to review the minutes.
Yes.
Yes.
Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great, unanimously adopted 4-0. The next matter on the agenda, Madam Chair, is the financial report. Is that going to be done by the treasurer or Julie? Whoever would like.
I would defer to the treasurer.
Yeah, so would I.
Okay. I mean, again, there's not a whole lot of activity that is happening in the agency from a standpoint of ins and outs, and so totally is 36,620 of income for this month, and that includes 21,195 for fees, rental leases, and then the escrow fees, 15,000, which really is related again to that agreement with Penrose.
Penrose Sentinel, yeah.
And again, interest is just one. Expenditures related to, of course, staffing, building companies. 810. Total expenses. And then when you look at the balance sheet, totaling 3,965,434. Of course, that includes an operating account of 1,227,000, and then in the pilot account 993,000. Money market and money market 813 or 814,000, and then your escrow. The escrow was 8,000. Receivables, so we still reflect as $81,221 for pilots. Pilot fees are outstanding. Liabilities, of course, are related to those payables for which actually most of the money paid out this month. Because I've asked that the account be switched when we're paying, so that the city, school county receive those on. Well, for the school, it doesn't matter as much as the other two because their fiscal years end around about, so there's fiscal year ending in December. Want to make sure that at least it fell within the right fiscal years. So we're making that little change. Those liabilities 124, 107. When you look at it at the end of the day, the total closing cash balance is $2,220,000. So you already have your outline of the pilots, what's been paid, what's been collected, what's outstanding. The same thing with fees, administrative fees. And so those are that's the financial information.
Okay, just a question. I see that Regent paid their pilot fee just a few weeks ago, but Dominican Magic is still outstanding. Where are we with collection efforts there? And I don't want to expend more money trying to collect than they owe us, so.
We reached out again, to
Plan.
the attorney,
Mhm.
no response via phone and email. I did talk to him maybe 3 months ago and said he would get back to me. He hasn't got back to me. So we could file a lawsuit and try to collect it and recapture all their benefits as part of that too, what we've given out in the past. That would be our recommendation.
Okay.
So I know they're in financial issues, but they have to pay their pilot payments.
I would agree. I want to kind of understand, and take a deeper look at what it would be to file the lawsuit, again, how much that might cost us
Yeah.
and, what that process.
We could prepare a budget and provide it to you. Ultimately, at the end of the day, any of the fees associated with getting that money, if we end up having any type of agreement with them, they would have to pay
Mhm.
as part of an expense. So sometimes you file the lawsuit and it jogs them, especially if they have to repay any other benefits they got. So let us provide a budget and we can give it to you and then take it from there. So next meeting.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But one of them did work, the Regent did work and they did pay for the fees that, so it cost you nothing.
So they have to pay their administrative fees now, so.
Yeah, that was,
The fee's still outstanding?
I believe it is, I don't know the exact amount, I don't think it's on the chart.
It's on the other one, 65,
6,500,
6333.
we'll follow up with them on that. Is
Okay. Thank you.
there any business development reports?
And a bunch of stuff.
Okay,
Well, I don't want to say a bunch of stuff. I do have, some that I'll list up. So, small business grants, we've collected all of the supporting documents that would, allow for the fee, for the awards to be dispersed, except for from 3 businesses who I am in contact with. So that money should be dispersed in the coming days. And as we know, the ARPA dollars that have funded the small business grant will be dispersed from the finance department. But all of the necessary documents have been received from those business owners.
And are we in contract with the ones who are not yet ready for disbursement? Have all of the contracts been executed?
We have, yes, all of the contracts have been executed. So now it's just a matter of getting like their W-9 or their EIN.
Okay.
So those, we do have one business owner who has since announced that their business will close. And so we'll need to discuss what we then do with those awards. Do we move forward with dispersing the awards? Because we've not gotten there yet. More than likely, although their request for the grant awards asked to use the grants for signage. But if they're going out of business, there may be some arrearages. I'm not sure, but my suggestion,
We have to see what the guidelines were in the beginning.
Right.
Because I don't know if it's, arrearages would be within the guidelines for the purpose for which that was. So we can always go back and look at that and discuss that.
correct.
Right.
So my suggestion was to have a conversation offline to get additional guidance on how we should move forward with that one business owner. Further moving forward in support of the Con Ed thermal utility project, for which I am partnering with the Director of Sustainability. Of course, this project partially crosses over into economic development, which is why I am working on the project. So the borehole was drilled onto the Dole Center. That testing is nearing completion and evaluation of the soil. And once all of that is completed, the test equipment will be removed from the borehole and the borehole will be covered up. The next phase includes more of an outreach to businesses so that they may participate in this project should the Public Service Commission award the agreement to Con Ed to move forward here in Mount Vernon. And so the desire is to ensure that as many businesses that are contractor related or construction related and are interested in participating in this type of project receive certification through Con Ed as well as MWBE certification so that they can compete for that. The first step towards providing access to MWBE certification as well as certification with Con Ed would be to have a tabling event, which is scheduled for February 6th, 2025. Any questions on that before I move through? And for now, because I know we have a presentation, I will end my report out there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is resolution. We have one resolution for today. Resolution 12/2024-1, which is the authorization for the payment of invoices. They include water supply, $1,444, New York State Insurance Fund, $400 for workers' comp. Magna Dry Inc. is $57 and change for project monitoring and air sampling that's related to the demolition at Fourth Avenue in Harris Beach in the amount of $8,400 and change. Is there a motion to authorize and approve the payment of invoices presented to the agency? There a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That's just 4-0. Next matter on the agenda is old business. This is the Q West project. I believe there's some representatives from the applicant here. So inclined to have, do you have any presentation or anything you want to ask or anything we want to discuss from the applicant side at this point?
We actually are looking to resolve the pilot and the for benefits. So I don't know, is Victoria gonna make a presentation or?
Unfortunately, she had a conflict and she could not be available.
So the background here, this is a project seeking pilot from the IDA. There's been some back and forth with our economic consultant, Stores Associates. She has recently provided an updated report, two reports dated November 26, 2024. One where 100% of the households would be expected to move into the project, and the other with 70%. Those were presented. I believe the board members have them. I know the applicant is here, and we'll try to answer any questions we can. But unfortunately, Victoria could not be here today.
We reviewed her report. I don't know if the IDA knows, we've been looking with Dr. Morton. Our last presentation of what we were looking to offer for benefits in regard to our ask of the pilot. And we were told that that was going to be discussed here today. So that we could come to a resolution and eventually have the matter to paper and have it signed and, you know, so that we can move on with our project.
I believe the pilot analysis is on page 15 and 16 of the storage report. That's probably the best location to look at.
Well, the Zoom-
Here.
Need a copy?
Okay, thank you.
You know, so the challenge that we have here and a lot of what the conversation and the back and forth over the past few months and where reports have been adjusted are around the number of students anticipated, the multipliers used, the 30-year loss to the school district and how that impacts the school district. You know, this report was initially done a while ago. There have been numbers adjusted based on addresses being updated, actual number of students being in those sites and those locations. You know, we know the school district is in fiscal distress, one of the top 3 fiscally distressed school districts in the city. We know the city is in fiscal distress, but this has more based on the calculations of a long-term impact on the school district.
Would you like me to tell you what our last bidder, what our last, effective was on what we were working with the agency on, and then we can move forward on working out what we need in order to have the, pilot and the IDA finalized?
Well, yeah, I guess you could, but I think that it is actually in the report, right? On page 8, because I communicated that to the Stephanie met was directed by this board, with the applicant on it. We had, they provided information to, stores, right? Which is, so it presents that as the $1 million that is a direct payment into the school district. There is an additional $562,000 that also is being given directly to the school district in years 16 to 30. So calculating that out. Here I see that the additional kind of proposal on that is on $1.4 million, right? In addition to that. So I said this to the mayor too. My concern is that it still kind of shows that there is this kind of deficit that is happening for the school district, and the school district has clearly voiced its concern about being able to make sure that the cost for students in the school district. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay, because
Yeah, I'm not feeling too well today, so I'm not gonna be my usual robust self. Between all that's been going on in my life and all of that and my health, I just am not as where I used to be, where I need to be. But nevertheless, so the school district has articulated exactly what its concerns are. I think that, and I want to be clear, I think I have made it very clear too on the onset, not just this project, but even previous projects, that my concern was that at least that we are reasonably covering costs of services in these deals. So I want to make it clear, because I'm not shifting my position on it, that we have to come with that. Understanding that it may not be dollar for dollar, and I get that, and there's some trade-offs here. We all kind of are learning part of it, but when we now look at it and say, okay, well, this appears, at least on paper, to be a significant kind of deficit or loss, we have to address this and try to figure out how we're going to actually come to some resolve if this project is going to be able to kind of move forward. So there's a multiplier, and how do you actually come up and how you determine the multiplier? And we've had some discussions around that too. Even I've had discussions even with Dr. McDonough on this too, and we disagree on kind of how you come to that, right? And what should be included and what should not be included. But what we did do is we actually got information from the school district around what the enrollments are in those in the projects that we give pilots to. So my position is, we're giving a pilot to we're giving a pilot to a project, we need to include it in our analysis as a part of how we come up with kind of a multiplier. At least that was my position on it, right? So that's the reason why when I even talked to Victoria, I said to her, no, we actually have to go back, because it's in a previous analysis on this, right? We actually had a wrong address, which it appears as if there was a wrong address. And so we got a number that wasn't true. What was in that, what was in there, now we include it in there. And we now change the multiplier kind of on it based upon that we are giving a pilot to these projects. These are the number of students that are in there. Recognizing that the research even says, because I'm gonna tell you, because of this, I have been researching. So I've got studies from Westchester County, I've got studies from New Jersey, and all of this around how you come up with and understand what the impact is of a project on a community, whether it is affordable or it is marketing. And guess what? There's no silver bullet. It varies, right? There's these variables that everybody says, and it ultimately comes down to at least the one report now that I looked at that was in the Westchester, that you got to really look at the community itself and use those factors of the community as to what is the cost factor and what they call marginal cost for the school district, which means that those costs, particularly kind of like instructional things of that sort, not necessarily the general kinds of costs outside of that, and look at and use that as part of the analysis and the multiplier, along with also the school district itself, where it is. You losing students, gaining students, what is that? There's a factor in it. So there's no silver bullet here. It's like we gotta now try to figure out for us what makes best sense. And then once we do that, we got to stay with that methodology and that formula, because otherwise, well, granted, for at least some period of time, at some point you got to go back and recalibrate it, but you can't keep fluctuating like between January and November of the same year using two different kind of analyses to come up with what that is at the end of the day. And I guess I'm giving all of this background for me because I've been outside of this meeting, even doing research and reading and having conversations with everybody, with the entire board. There's not one person on this board, voting or not, that I've not been communicating with, right, on this, so that we could try to figure out, what's the best kind of pathway forward. At the end of the day, we got to figure out how do we close that gap, right? And how do we close that gap? Right. Can we, or how do we close that gap, right? Because again, on it to kind of move it forward. So I guess that's kind of where I am. I mean, I wanted to bring that, then we can start talking about what recommendations and solutions maybe.
And this has been the conversation from the beginning, right? Not only is the school district in fiscal distress, the city is in fiscal distress. And so every project that we're evaluating, we're making sure that we can meet the needs of the school, that we can meet the financial needs of the city. The school district has their challenges. They're looking at closing schools, the city and not having contracts. The city hasn't had contracts and our buildings are crumbling and our roads and infrastructure and things of that nature. And while we have always said from the very beginning, we don't expect one project to be a silver bullet. We don't expect one project to be able, and we're never put that on one project. We have to evaluate each of the projects and make sure that they are not adding to the fiscal distress of the city or the school district. That has been the conversation from the very beginning. We've talked about not just on its face, but how do we make sure that this is a benefit to Mount Vernon residents while, and I'm going to say this very clear, because I've been pushing back on a lot of HCR, Housing and Community Renewal. I've been pushing back on the state's structure and how these deals are structured, and understanding while the state is putting money into it and there is a benefit and it lessens the risk for the developers or the project. The fact that as communities, we do not get preference, we don't get set asides, whatever it is that you want to call it, to ensure that the city, who is also giving up potential revenue, that revenue would be beneficial to our residents, right? We have an aging housing stock. We see that. We understand that we have to replace housing stock so that our residents can have a better quality of life. And we want to be able to do that, but we cannot do that at the expense of being able to provide services to the same people that we put in nice new buildings, right? And so this has been the conversation all along. All of us who sit around here, unlike prior IDAs, we're all residents. we're paying taxes, and we're dealing with the same challenges that the rest of our residents are faced with. So we're not just looking at this through just the strict business, oh, this might be nice, but the impact that it has on our residents, the impact it has on our services, and our city and our school district. So I think all of us have taken closer looks at projects. And as we said before, we are not a new IDA, but we are a new IDA with authorities, right? And so we're walking through a process that we have not necessarily been through a lot. Board members have gone for training. Board members will continue to seek out training, and so that we can always have a critical eye. And as we look at projects and make sure that we're seeing it from all angles. So I think all of us want to find a resolution, but we need to find a resolution that does not bring harm to the school district or the city. And if we can't find that, then we can't move forward, right? Right? Because one of the things that I know that the developer has also been asking us, they're like, please stop kind of dragging this along. Either we're going to go forward or we're not. Either we're going to find a solution or we're not. And one of the biggest things that people are looking for in all of this is certainty. So, we have to get to a place where we are figuring out what we're going to do. And we know that there are other considerations and other timelines and deadlines that are happening with other monies that you're receiving from the county. And so, we're either going to get to a place where we figure this out, where it is not injurious to the city and to the school district, or it will not work, right? Because
I'm sorry, and I thought I think we thought that when we were doing the UTEP, when we redid it again, and Stephanie and I have been having this discussion for the last week or so, that we probably got to go back to it and look at it again. Even looking at some of our neighboring kind of UTEPs and what they have and things that they have in it, and we may even have to go back and look at it. But we thought that we had kind of come up with a solution, like we kind of solve some of this, right? Which was that we would have these conditions in there, that if the numbers, that we can figure out what the numbers are going to be, and if the numbers are not met, that then there was this kind of charge on it for it to cover that, right? To make sure that you cover the gap for it. The applicant kind of pushed back on it and said, well, they really wanted to try, for financing purposes, try to have kind of consistency across the years of the pilot so that they could plan for it, which is how we kind of got to this $1 million. Okay, so let's give $1 million ahead of time. And then we further got to, okay, well, by the time you get to years 15 and 16, that they would be able to now give a certain amount of money additional, whether the number is up or not. So that wasn't contingent upon whether the number was up or not, right? That's how we we attempted to try to resolve this issue. Everybody that I talked to says that you have to make sure that there is a factor in there that ensures that there is not this loss anywhere kind of along the project. And I think that Yonkers does, is Yonkers has this condition of that whatever the tax rate is for that is basically what gets embedded in on top of the pilot payment. So the pilot payment is $100,000 for that year. If the school district then has a 2% kind of tax, tax rate, then basically 2% on that goes on to the pilot. So maybe that's a solution to this here, to try to, because one, we really don't know what the number is. Right. We're projecting based upon what we've seen has happened, but we also know, as also the report for Westchester says, that we also know that we have changes in the enrollment, right? And it's decreasing. So you're supposed to take that into consideration too, right? In that. Well, we don't know what that is, right? We know what's been happening, right? But I don't know how we now quantify that into a number to try to come up with as part of the formula to say, okay, this is what works. I don't know. So I'm just, I'm trying to give the board, because what I see what happens is, and what I feel has happened in the last few months is that the everything is pointed at the treasurer to try to give information. And I'm like, I'm trying to learn this myself too. So I'm doing my best to give as much of the information that I have learned in my last 3 weeks since our last meeting about how this has been handled. And I guess that's a discussion for the board to figure out, well, where are we going?
Right, and one of the things that even the applicant has said, and the school district, it's one of the things that they agree on is that enrollment has gone down, right? So, and then the school district predicts right now that by 2033 enrollment might be as low as 5,000, that 5,000 students, I believe. So we're paying attention, right? We're paying attention. We're digesting this information. So, when we look at that, there's almost it's not balanced because we're predicting a decrease, and in here we're predicting an increase year over year. And so none of this is an exact science. We can look at studies everywhere, but studies are not necessarily our community. And we just can't predict which way it's going to go. But the crisis is that we are both entities of government within the city are at such a I don't want to say deficit. We don't have fund balances. We don't have reserves. And so the preciseness of our planning has to be, so exact in an environment that is not certain. It's kind of what we call VUCA, volatile, uncertain. We're operating in very much a VUCA environment, and we're trying to have certainty, and it's very hard to have certainty when there is so much volatility and uncertainty locally, state, nationally, and so these are some of the things that we're trying to resolve. And I know that sounds like we're saying a lot, but because we're dealing with them.
Well, it sounds like we're saying a lot and saying nothing, but we are actually saying something. Right. And I think that is, we've made some progress because when you look at the last part of this, from the school services standpoint, the actual finances kind of work. It's at the school services, the cost on school services that it does not.
Right. And we're not losing that. And so just for those who are listening, VUCA is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. I think that really, guys, so there's a lot of complexities and ambiguity that we're dealing with. Mr. McDonough.
Thanks. So there has been an evolution in the multiplier. From the first time it was done, and Ms. Storrs she threw out the Rucker study. She used the National Association of Home Builders, the Nanyang study. And then she moved away from that based on the letter from the school district. Right. We then subsequently, that brought it up to 0.15 and change, which is what was used in the last project. And subsequently it went up to 0.18 and change based on updated actuals. And also the big factor was that 203 Gramerton, which was coming up showing 0 students, but we realized it was the wrong address.
That's the wrong address. Right.
When we got the right address, it showed that there was a large number of students. Proportion was 0.2 something.
Yeah, 30 some odd students with this.
So right now, I think that the overall methodology Ms. Storrs uses, backing out foundation aid, recognizing that there is facility room. It's not like we need to build a new school to accommodate students, right? I understand that. I think she comes to a reasonable per pupil cost annually. I think that's reasonable. The problem comes in if you're off by 15% on the number of students, and that compounds over 30 years, it adds up to a large number. That's the funding gap that she comes up with. And so this is where it's important. Well, we have to live with uncertainty. We know demographics are changing. I think we do have to get to a fairly conservative number that reduces the risk that we will harm the school district by having a large funding gap that has to be made up by the rest of the taxpayers in the community, because that's what we're talking about. If there is a gap in funding here, that gap needs to be made up by people who are paying their property taxes. So that's what we need to try and reduce. So the 0.18, for me, the big sort of disagreement over that is whether or not you include the market rate project, in particular the Enclave in Fleetwood, or not. And that comes down to a demographic difference. Do market rate rental buildings yield fewer public school children than affordable projects do, right?
Right.
That's important to understand, because if the answer is yes, there are fewer, and the answer is yes, when you include that in your multiplier mix, it artificially pulls the number down, right? So if you take Enclave out, the multiplier drops to 0.22. When you keep it in, it's 0.18. So, I mean, I understand maybe we are at 0.18, that's fine. But even with the upfront payment from the developer, you still have a $3 million 30-year funding gap.
Correct.
And that means that money has to be picked up by the local community. So you have to weigh that versus the value that the project offers overall. And I just don't know. Also, we have to keep in mind that if that 0.18 is a more accurate number, that means the last one, the 115 Southwestern, we recalculated based on 1.15. That means the gap, which was around 4 million, is really going to grow to about 7 million for that project over the life of the project. So that's why it's important, I think, to be conservative when you're measuring this for the school district. That's basically the position there.
Yeah, no, and I agree with everything that you're saying, and which is what I think you're gonna kind of articulate the same in a little different of a way. So, yeah, there is, and clearly they say that if you're looking at straight point market rate versus affordable projects, yeah, there is this difference in how you project the number of students that may very well be there based upon that. However, they also then said, well, wait a minute, don't take that as straight, right? That you got to also take into consideration some other things too, because there's also a variable that it also changes, because even when you do that, it changes that if the project is within a transit-oriented community, right? They say, well, that has a factor on it, is what it says. This is why I kept saying that there's all of these different kind of variables on it that ultimately, for me, what became the best kind of study for me was actually the impact of affordable housing projects that was done by RH Consultant for Westchester, right? Which ultimately said, basically, you got to look at your community. At the end of the day, you got to look at the community, right? You got to look at kind of what the marginal cost is, right, for the impact on the school district, and what is happening in the enrollment, increasing or decreasing, whatever the case may be, right, at the end of the day. So I think, yeah, we got to figure out what is that, and then go from there.
One way to model this, well, there are a couple of ways to model it, is to use a trailing indicator approach. So, we can't do it in real time. So we say, all right, we calculated this year 0.18 or whatever the number is. That you use that for projects over the next 2 years. Then you take another measure, and wherever it is that you use that for the next 2 years. So you use this trailing indicator. What's that?
No, I was
Saying that's important.
right. And then verbalizing to myself so that I can understand it better. I apologize.
So I think that gives you some certainty as far as projects in the pipe, though. So, for example, the QS developer, suppose we do a model that shows 0.18, and 10 years into the project, it turns out that it's 0.05, right? Is there a way to adjust midstream when you have a 30-year pilot through your UTEP? Can you articulate some approach there in your UTEP so that they're not unfairly penalized? So it goes both ways. The idea is to model it have that in place, adjust with real community data, which is how we got to this number here, leaving the enclave issue aside. 0.18 is a measure of in real time, right now, what we have in projects like this in the community. So I think that seems like a reasonable approach going forward. The other thing you could do is to add to that, when you're doing something like this, you throw the high and low value out. Right? So you take outliers. I would say the enclave could be an outlier. You might have one that's 0.4 that's an outlier.
You throw it out.
So you throw those out, so you throw the outliers out.
To kind of consider for this reasonable marginal error.
Correct.
Of it. Yeah, I get it. And I think that's a possibility. The challenge for the project, like you said, in the pipe is to figure out, okay, so how do we address this issue? And address it in a way fair to you and, fair to the city right now, going forward. And one of the challenges was, not having kind of certainty about what your payments were every year, right? Because if that is not the thing that's holding us, then we can try to figure out what that is and have an evaluation. So do you have an reevaluation of it every 5 years around that to say, or whatever the case be? I don't know. I'm just throwing it out, right? It becomes a problem, right? Or do we say, okay, so here is what we are anticipating to you all now. Y'all are saying 15 on, maybe there needs to be that there's these additional payments on the year amount, but a set amount every year that kind of fills in that gap. I don't know. So I'm throwing it out because we're having a discussion to try to figure out how do we resolve it.
I think most of the other, other LDAs and then Darius probably knows this as well. Have there's a set amount, and it's got a lot to do with the financing, especially on the affordable side. So that was why we were asking not to have, not to have a number that is subject to change, and that's what we're actually looking for here. I do want to just point out, when you were bringing out what we had offered, we offered the other $500,000 when we were speaking. At that point, I think you said the firemen, we offered it as a fireman.
And that's why I said that I didn't mention it, but that's why I said for the city, right, where we landed was in a better position, because if you look at it, the city actually the impact on it is on the positive side because of those things, right? That have been added into that. Now, again, but the school district is out, right? That's the issue. So we're trying to figure out what that is. And maybe we gotta look at the whole thing and say, okay, so is there something there that needs to be, is there something there that gets shifted to it if we're trying to work out the project? I don't know.
We appreciate you guys for looking at this fine tune. Obviously, there's no silver bullet. I think we know it's gonna be time, developers as you go, get the data and obviously retool yourself to make sure you fill the gaps. The problem we have now is obviously we've been here so many times that our funding sources are gonna collapse. We can't get some done by the end. So we're here to listen. We don't want to, we're willing to put more money into the deal if we have to, but we need to find a decision that makes sense for you guys, makes sense for us. And obviously you guys are the gatekeepers, so we really can't read your mind and what that number is. We could guess on what that number is 15. We don't know, it might go down. Like you said. It might be because we're in transfer-oriented development, it might be less students there. So it's the housing stock. We are going to put housing stock, which you said is really dilapidated, and there's a need for it. So the good thing is that we are doing that for the city of Mount Vernon. I think that a lot of people said there's overcrowded apartments. I think some of those people are going to go into a building from Mount Vernon.
I mean, the school continues to reference, 11% of their students being homeless. That's a potential benefit, and if children, and when we say homeless, we're not meaning street homeless, we're not meaning in a shelter homeless, we're not meaning sleeping in the car homeless, we're meaning people who are living doubled up, right? And so they can be living doubled up in apartments, they can be living doubled up in homes and things of that nature. We don't have an exorbitant amount of students who are living in shelters, not at all. And this is from somebody who's worked in housing in Westchester for 30 years. But we do And we know it from collection of garbage, from use of water, from going into houses for EMS or for fire, that we do have people who are living double. And so, one of the reasons that we want to support projects is to make sure that our children and our families have quality of living. And when a child has a bed and their own space and a quiet space, then they can study and we can have greater success around their education. If they're successful in their education, they become stronger residents and have better impact on the city. And so that's important. But at the same time, we want to make sure as we get them in their seats in their classes that they have the resources that they need to become successful in the school building as well. And so this was the challenge. And literally, we were a few minutes late starting this meeting because up until like after the meeting was scheduled just about to start, we were talking about some of those complexities, transit-oriented design. High-rise buildings tend to have less students than lower-rise buildings. And, what is the definition of high-rise? High-rise is the definition of 10 floors or more, and these are 13 and 15 stories. So we're looking at everything. But the clock is running. The clock is running.
So I guess the question
So I guess the question is that, yeah, I mean, so even to Mr. McDonough and Dr. McDonough's point, right? I mean, looking at it at somewhere, if you got it somewhere in the process of saying, okay, looking and seeing, is there a place where you now look at it and say, okay, well, where are we actually in this, right? But also to your point, trying to figure out how you create some kind of consistency. Is there a way, and I don't know if this ever is done, is there a way to say, okay, in year 5, this is what we already have identified what this potentially could be in year 5, similar to what y'all did with 15 through whatever, y'all saying y'all gonna give this amount of money in those years. Maybe there's a way to bake in the additional payments into this.
We're not opposed to doing upfront payments. We just need to get this either yes or no, move forward with the project and provide some new, housing for member and, we just need, obviously, for you guys to tell us what that is. And we make a decision, we go forward and we sign and we move forward. To have a project now on the brink of not going forward.
When we put the upfront payment would help a lot. It's not an insubstantial amount of money. It's $1 million upfront. We felt that was really a strong, you can get a lot of use out of that. And then the payments over the years 16 through 30 are substantial payments as well. We're willing, if you talk to us about a mix of something along that line, that's why we're here. So we can,
We
get it done.
here we have to say. The ask, tell us what seen the data up and down, obviously, it's not even a concrete answer, but I think
Yeah.
enough data to really consider it.
I appreciate that. What about, I understand your payments in years 16 through 30, but what if there was something in years 1 through 15 as well
So let me ask you.
to help
If we
offset?
just- Obviously, as developers, we're prepared to move forward. What happens if we offer, instead of $1 million up front at the closing, we offer $2 million? Close the gap. You guys can put the money at the school system and we get our approval to move forward. And you guys have a substantial amount of money day one that you could put aside, compounded interest, whatever you want in order to bridge the gap. And it's a fair resolution on both sides and we kind of can save this project and get it built.
Go into an executive session and have a
Yeah, I
conversation.
think we should go into executive session. I think that.
I make a motion to go into executive session.
Thank you very much.
Second?
We're kind of like Indiana's five. Like, we're driving.
And
That's the flowing, we're gonna go.
executive session, I want to say this, and I want to say this very clearly on the record, right? Just like the city of Mount Vernon is trying to spend down their ARPA monies by December 31st and allocate them and be in contract and commit them. The county, I think, has ARPA monies in this as part of their
Correct.
ARPA Flex Fund, right? And so we need to get to a place, so either the county knows that they can commit this money or they're reallocating the money, but
Sure.
and that's why we're trying to drill down and have these conversations.
Appreciate
So I don't want anyone to think that that is lost on us as well. We don't want anyone to have to turn back money. So either it's gonna go to this project or it's gonna go somewhere else. So we wanna bring this to a resolution.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Mayor. And also, obviously, the housing stuff is gonna improve. There's a dollar amount. How do you put a dollar amount on that? You know, like you said, the welfare of new children going into a new space, beautiful, calm, quiet. I mean, there's a halo effect, you know, some kind of thing.
Let me just ask one quick question for you. So, because y'all already have offered the kind of the 15-year on some additional payments. What are you, based upon your, I'm just thinking as we talk, based upon your model here, is there ways of y'all increasing those amounts also for those years?
The problem,
I was gonna suggest.
No, I think we'll talk about it, but I didn't want to have that
Just
discussion.
changing something on the schedule, the pilot schedule, is that what happens with that, then all the funding gets. Because of the bonding, he knows. So that's why the upfront payment, I think, it's gonna come out of our pocket to make the deal happen, but it's real money you get day one, not 15 years from now, because
Okay.
you know. compound.
Let us have a discussion.
So a combination of an upfront and then in like 15 through 30.
Yes.
An extra 75,000, because then,
Well, that's what I meant.
that's what I'm saying, because
Yeah.
then it's spread out, or
Ask Mayor,
Right.
it's fine.
but then we're talking about it spread out. It's predictable.
I'm speaking French.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
That closes the gap.
So-
And we'll come back whenever you want.
And when we say we're close to the gap, just so we have an idea, what is the number that you're using? It's the 0.1, it's the point.
That's what we're getting you.
Yeah, so what we have in front of us. Right now. So we're gonna, we'll work on
Thank you.
Okay, so we have to finish the.
it. We gotta vote.
It could be,
We gotta vote.
Motion to go into executive session.
yes,
I think Ryan made the motion.
I second it.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
4-0. Quorum,
Thank you.
passes.
Thank you.
Executive session.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we gotta. Harris.
I'd like to make a motion that we come out of executive session at 2:17
Second.
PM.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
4-0, passes.
Okay. So while we were in a executive session, we just had a conversation, because it's not a conversation that one person can't have a conversation. So we had to have a discussion, amongst the board and amongst the two governing entities within the city of Mount Vernon to make sure that, we were going to be okay. Of course, we didn't take any vote, but before you left, you asked us, what would this look like? You had made an offer of 2 million, I believe.
Yes.
And we looked at what the cost was over time. I'm assuming that 2 million also went along with the increases in
That was-
16 through 20.
37.
Which we calculated
Correct.
come out to about 562,000.
Correct.
Correct.
Yes,
Course
correct.
of it.
Yes.
So with that being said, we were still trying to figure out how to make them whole on the 2.9, right? And so this would bring us to about almost 2.562, which is still a little bit short. So of course, part of the discussion was, could it be 2.5 in the beginning, or can it be 2 million in the beginning? And then we add on to years 16 through 20 to make it.
If it's gonna make us end the discussion and move forward, we can give it $2 million and we could adjust the pilot for those years going forward. Yes.
So then that would mean that what we talked about was that either right. So your two options were that if it's 2.5 up front and leave the numbers where they are for each of those years, which was 25, 33, 37, or whatever, right, for those years, right? Or you do 2 million upfront and you double those numbers. So now your 25 becomes 50, right?
We'll take the later of the two, I think is better for us.
Okay.
Okay.
The board.
So then we're gonna ask that, and so once the board decides what it's gonna do, if we do that, then I'm gonna ask Kathleen that you will resend an updated memo like you did
Okay.
before, okay?
And, again, because before we went into executive session, we talked about the time sensitivity of this and wanting to make sure that this was going to work for the city, the district, but also the county, who has a big investment in this, right?
Yes,
And we don't want them to lose any of this money, because that's the county money then.
correct.
So, oh my goodness, how did y'all do that? What does the timeline look like in turning this around and being able to bring this to a resolution or a vote so that we can meet those time guidelines? I mean, so a memo is gonna be written, we'll get the memo.
I'll get it to you
Okay.
this afternoon. I'll
Afternoon.
turn it back to my office
Do you
and
need-
send.
Have to
Do you need,
forward another meeting so that.
I think you have to do a resolution.
I want to ask them, what's your timing? Does this need to happen before year end?
you were
It
hoping.
absolutely does. They have to be, they have.
She knows about it.
So I believe there's 15 million or 10 million, what is it, 15?
In flex funds.
We could consider a final authorizing resolution because the inducement happened, the public hearing happened.
Correct.
You could consider a final authorizing resolution today, subject to drafting by us and confirmation by the board.
Right back to the
Subject,
board, because that's.
Oh, yeah.
That.
yeah, resolutions always come to you.
Mhm.
Subject to confirmation on the memo from council for the developer that and it'll be attached to the resolution. But we
How
can,
long does it take you all to do the final resolution?
we could do the resolution next week.
So then, well,
Or do you want to have another meeting next week?
why don't just have the meeting? I mean, we can agree to move forward and just have but I would like to have the specifics. of
Specifics in hand,
Formal meeting.
Resolution,
Just,
right?
yes.
in terms of, I need to be out on next Tuesday. That's not my only.
We could do it this week, whatever works for you guys. And obviously the resolution is gonna follow
The soonest we
the
can-
vote, obviously. And the
So
memo is basically what we just talked about. We're not gonna change that
I have
record.
With the 19th, work?
flexibility, I mean, I have a local,
Either way, you gotta adopt the resolution.
Yeah,
like 11, I mean, 11 o'clock on Monday, does that work for people? Tuesday, you're out,
I can't do Monday, Mayor.
can't do Monday?
We could prepare the resolution before then, but.
About Wednesday.
I mean, if we could-
You want to do Thursday? Thursday is good.
Thursday would allow us enough time to alert the public.
I don't think,
You can still have, but
Is it a certain amount of business days or a certain two business?
when you have a scheduled meeting, they like to have 72 hours, but we don't, it's not absolutely necessary, but if we can, that would be good, so we
Yeah,
can
that'd be
notify
better.
people.
Yeah,
Thursday?
December 19th is the proposed.
Thursday at 11
Thursday. at-
afternoon.
want to him?
What's going on with this calendar?
11 works for me. I will make it work for me.
Yeah, right?
It just has to be short, but it should be so.
30 minutes.
11.
10, 5. Resolution. But
The 19th?
if you can get the resolution to us by Monday so that we can review it,
Sure.
ask any questions.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward resolution. We do this on all the projects, but the memo attached will be.
And we'll send
We need to see.
it to Victoria so she can
Sure.
input whatever
Yep.
numbers that she has to input into the financial analysis.
We asked for sales tax. Are you including the sales tax on that as well?
Yeah, that's what you had said. Yeah, that was in Victoria's analysis. Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah, I did. I know it was in our analysis.
So you want to remember to include the pilot and also the.
We just need the pilot details. There's a sales tax exemption request, and that'll be part of the authorizing resolution, but we want to look at the pilot so that everyone knows what they're voting on, which will be part of the ultimate pilot agreement.
And up for payments also.
Yeah, and including that, yeah, including all that.
Okay. We all good?
December 19th, Thursday at 11.
Bring the champagne.
Sparkling apple cider.
Sparkling apple cider work.
I know. I don't think so.
Okay,
We move on to new business?
yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry.
We have here a generic concept, the discussion of 2025 goals of the IDA. I think we kind of talked about one of them before, potentially looking at amendments to the UTEP. And we can look at that and propose some things that are kind of, what we've been hearing. And we can redline the current UTEP for you to look at, and we can, that's one goal maybe you want to take, but is there any other goals that either Robin or the chair members want to discuss?
I mean, one of my goals also is to find a way for our city to advocate and have a conversation with HCR and do what some of the other cities have done, right? When you look at Mamaroneck in certain neighborhoods gets to have a resident guarantee because of the
Yeah.
challenges of those neighborhoods. And yeah, look, other communities are
Yeah, they
doing
did it. Yeah. I saw it.
communities are doing it, and that has been one of my biggest problems with pilots and HCR funding and things of that nature is we're having this, we're sitting here amongst ourselves fighting about 100%, 70%. I mean, when we can have some certainty, everyone's looking at certainty for the developers. We would like to have some certainty for our community, knowing that this will be a benefit to our current residents. And that would also help us look at not having this 100%, 70% conversation. If we know that 25% of these units are set aside for Mount Vernon residents, it can help us plan, it can help us work, it can help us do these things. And all of that is calculated in, and it makes it easier to do projects that are not going to be injurious, right? And so for me, one of the goals would be to really have a meeting with HCR, and whether we go up there or get them to come down here. And, everyone wants us to be a pro-housing community, but we cannot be a pro-housing community at the detriment of our stability, So.
Really? So new business?
We're still on new business, yes.
So, when we talked about the UTEP, right? And maybe that putting together maybe the finance committee should probably begin to look at it. Who is the finance committee? Me, you, Stephanie, and
Would have to probably be a quorum, so it's probably you and Stephanie then. We can look, Julie, you don't have the,
I think it's me and Stephanie.
You and Stephanie?
The finance committee is a committee of the whole. All board members are on the finance committee.
All right, well, maybe me,
Sub.
Stephanie, and then, if, if we thought to look at it and talk about it, maybe if, Chris, if you want to engage in the conversation. Okay? Maybe we'll look at it. Let's look at it and see. So, and given that we've been looking at other models, and let's look at it and see where there might be things for us to change. Okay. So let's plan to do that. So we can at least look at it. See what we can.
I mean, is there like a state IDA authority or, I mean, it would be nice to speak to someone who has an eye on this throughout the state. Or if we know if there are other states that are doing it a little better. I mean, we may not be able to do what other states do. That's why I want to look at what's happening throughout the state and maybe have someone kind of come down and give us a presentation, because what we have said over and over again is that we are a newer we're an IDA board with new authorities, or our authorities have been, reestablished. And so the educational process, as we're sitting here looking at the acknowledgement of fiduciary duties and responsibilities, it's really incumbent upon us that education is definitely a part of this board, and not just for a few, but everyone. As Morton said, well, sometimes we might look to you and Stephanie because you're handling the cash flow of the city and you're dealing with always defending the assessed value of the city. And so it's not like we step back and we're not interested, but at the end of the day, y'all are dealing with the finances.
No, I get it. I think that we could probably reach out to the Academy folks and see if there's somebody that may be able to provide us with some kind of resources.
I think, the one that you went to recently and Austin was very informative. Every new board member, including Mr. McDonough, need to get trained. I forget how many hours it is. It's 3 or 4, which you have to do by January.
Then even have them help us, right? Because it's
Does that count?
for our edification.
I think.
It's count. And it's not just for our edification, right? I think there is a lot of misinformation and disinformation as to what pilots are, period. People say, you got a pilot, they pay no taxes. No, it's a payment in lieu of taxes, but it is taxes. It's just calculated differently. But, as we're educating ourselves, we also have to educate the community. Because that's a hurdle that becomes hard to overcome, right? We are public servants, right? But we're also residents. And the more the business owners, the more the residents, the more the taxpayers understand this. Because we're not just making the decisions now. We want to set an environment where it's going forward that other people would not be afraid to sit in public service and have your question and your integrity questioned all the time, because it is making it more and more difficult for good people to step up to serve, because you're being attacked constantly because of misinformation. So I think it's not just our responsibility to educate ourselves as the board, but to make sure that the community has an understanding. And unfortunately, sometimes it's kind of like in church. You don't always want to acknowledge what your pastor is saying, but as soon as a visiting preacher comes, it's the gospel, right? So sometimes when an outside an authority comes and they're able to present factual information, it's easier sometimes for people to hear it. We could say it over and over and we could create PowerPoint slides, but we might need to get someone else to come from outside and do a presentation for our community, a town hall, whatever, so we can have discussion and understand that it's been done bad in the past, but that if we're working together, just as we did today, that it can happen, and it can happen responsibly.
Right.
I think that's a great point. One thing that can help tie the idea to the community is to build it into the comprehensive plan. because it really can be a tool for the development of the economy. Certainly, I'd see the value of doing it to rehab and improve the housing stock. That's valuable to the community. But that's not necessarily going to lead to increased sales.
Right.
It may not. So far, it hasn't. It may, but if you tie that, you have the comprehensive plan going on right now and include the city council and the people who are working on that and say, look, how do we use this tool? 'Cause this is a powerful tool. The ability to give tax abatements is a powerful tool. You know, if we use that, then it can have that purpose of improving the overall economy. And I think you're right. There's a knowledge gap. Part of it is it's tricky stuff to understand. You know, it's not, shelter rent is not something that people understand. It took me a while to wrap my head around. Yeah, yeah.
We're learning, we're learning.
And that's one of the things
So,
that they talked about at the academy. You have people by virtue of their positions on boards for things they know nothing about.
The state controller puts data out about
Right.
IDA. That's helpful. And the summaries in the controller reports are usually pretty good. So there are data from the state out there. But I agree, more needs to be done. I talk to people and they're like, oh, pilots, so they don't have to pay any taxes? And I'm like, no, that's not what it means. It doesn't mean no taxes.
I think as Madam Mayor said, there's a misconception that everybody thinks pilots, they don't have to pay taxes. So I hear that all the time and I do clarify, but I do think one of our goals for 2025, we definitely got to revise our UTAP again. And then also, I think we also probably need to hire an outside monitor too, to make sure that when these developments are going on, that they're meeting the benchmarks that we set going forward.
Oh, yeah, they have to submit data to show that they're complying with what they said they did. Otherwise, we can claw back.
well, what the thing is,
But
the thing,
we review.
Someone should look at that, yeah.
creating the contracts, right? As we're creating the contracts. Easier monitoring is based on easier access to what the expectations are. And so we have the contract, but we have to create some type of cover pages that lift up and out what the promises have been, so we don't have to go dig through 100-page contract. And
Yeah, what you can do is hire someone, a consultant to look at it. Yeah, like a consultant. Yeah. Nurse Shell does it
Okay.
that way. Yeah.
We need again outside.
Or we
I think it's one of the accounting,
either an outside consultant, or it just needs to be more easy.
Yeah,
it's more easily accessible.
they need to provide it for the documentation to the state, but someone independent looking at it to make sure it's
But
happening.
somebody's gonna be looking at it currently.
And-
If you have the right ID staff, if you have the right ID staff, then you can do that.
We don't have that.
Oh, you have money, you can do.
Right,
Yeah, right.
so, right, if you have more than one, right now we have one employee trying to do.
Yeah.
Right.
There,
So that's a.
Robin and Julie.
there may be, right.
This leads me to, this leads me to my
Yeah.
other kind of new item, which is, how do we leverage IDA and ability to do pilots to generate business and operation? And do we need to maybe consider that we might need to hire somebody who has the expertise around that, particularly to help us to kind of help to pull in, business right into the city, and again, it comes up to me because I am looking at when I see when I see that like something like a Maggie Sabalanes has gone, and we've got things like that. It's like the question is there something else that we as IDA can do? And I know again we as a board can't do it because we don't have the expertise to do it. It's not our responsibility to do it. But we got to figure out, is there either a consultant we can hire? Is there something that we need to be looking at? Is there another model out there? I don't know. So I throw it out there to say, I'm just trying to figure out how can we
We're looking at putting,
generate their e-coms.
we're doing a lot of the baseline work, but people say, well, how did this happen in New Rochelle? How did this happen in White Plains? Because you didn't have one person, you had a body, you had a group, you had people who've been doing this for decades and years. at a high level, really being very strategic about it. And Mount Vernon, we are behind so far. And I'll say it, I will say it, and I will probably get some calls about it, but I don't care. Our chamber is weak. We do not have a strong chamber of commerce, right? That is meeting, that is coming together, that is represented industrially, retail, just businesses of all types coming together and being part of a strategic plan. And so as we try and go forward and put in for DRE applications, that's a limit that we have is really having an active and invested and a moving chamber of commerce. It's not like the Chamber of Commerce is around the community, and it has not been that way for a long time, right? But Mount Vernon hasn't been what Mount Vernon used to be. And so we have to be very intentional about how do we pull all of those things back together, because it's not just the government that has to do it. Our business sector has to be invested, everything. And so all of our stakeholder groups, from government to private business to not-for-profits to, the school, faith, civic, all of us have to be down, working together to figure out how this happens.
Another great point. I think one challenge is the limited land. It's small geography. So putting those land assets to use in things other than housing, I think it's important, right, to rebuild the housing stock. But looking at the land assets that the city has, including land assets that the school district has, right? There's potentially which may, come available if we end up having to close schools. How do we make bets on industries that are valuable to this community that will generate jobs and sales tax revenue? So for example, old housing stock, old electrical, old roof, old carpentry, old windows. There are ways to build light manufacturing in here to feed your contractors who are doing that kind of work to rehab the stock. My house is 100 years old. I just put a new roof on the windows. It costs an arm and a leg. I would have preferred to purchase all of that or components thereof from someone in the community. So putting any land assets that we have, given the limited land we have, and starting to earmark that to make bets on industries, not just cannabis. I don't put cheap points cannabis, but we got some of that, but making some other industries.
Here at the same time that, people are talking about cannabis, we're also looking at creating, local laws and ordinances around how to make sure that.
I understand. I was just being.
I get it. And I want you to know that even some of the projects that are coming before us and that we're looking at, that's one of the things that we said, we want mixed use. So even if we're doing housing, mixed use housing doesn't always have to be retail at the bottom. Mixed use housing can be light industrial at the bottom, so that we're bringing back some of the manufacturing.
And Sentinel is looking to do.
They're looking at that. So, and then so many different developers say that they want to condoize their projects. And so, okay, you might have something like that, but the light industrial or the retail helps to balance that package and make it more attractive. So, please know that these are things that we have been looking at. These are things that we have been discussing. One of the first things that we had to do was get the IDA together and get our credentials back. Another thing that we had to do is really start working on our infrastructure, because our businesses were being devastated by the infrastructure and things of that nature. And so you're not hearing about sewer backups and floods as you did before. They are still happening because they happen everywhere, but not at the rate, because we are moving and we're working in that. At the same time, our bridges are opening back up, and that's going to help, right? Because bridges being down, and Ms. Mack can tell you that she's been speaking to businesses around the places where the bridges are down, and that hurts. And so we're looking for those to be back open, and the other ones that we don't have funding. So it's layering. Right? It's layering. It's easy to sit back and talk about what we should do. But when you realize the layers, the level of layers that have to happen for this to come, because most people don't pay attention until it impacts them. So,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, no,
and then we're gonna go, I know you're ready.
I agree. I was just saying that in regards to our goals, we also, Mrs. Mack is the only director for the economic development. She's one person, and she's handling all of this. We probably would have to look too to actually increase her staff.
Well, that's what we were saying, is, you know, add support to create a team. And, you know, no one is an island and no one can do this all by
No,
themselves, right?
Very
Planning
difficult.
Department
Right.
is not
And
a
then
plan.
she's building up from the bottom up, which
Excuse me.
trying to get the inventory.
Thank you.
For the businesses and, you know, the sections and speaking to the developers and trying to bring them into what we're going to create going forward for the city of Mount Vernon. As far as with the condos, with development projects, we also had 22 West. They also added condos there too, that they have there on that commercial condos, but yes.
And just the last thing, because we gotta go, but just so you know, as we're talking to some other people as well, not everyone wants a house, but there are still people who want to be owners. And so as we look at building up, we're looking at how do we expand our condos, condominium, co-op opportunities so that people can have home ownership in a way that works for them. So these are things that we are discussing, and clearly those are much more market rate than others. And balancing that and again, doing mixed projects like that. So I think we have.
We're pretty much done with new business, just acknowledgement of the fiduciary duty statement. I think everyone has that. If they could fill that out and provide it to Robin. The confidential board evaluation, also, and then our meeting calendar for 2025. Do we have that set yet?
No,
I know we're January 9th is our next meeting.
the next
I-
meeting.
I sent the meeting schedule in the November meeting minutes, but the
Yes, I
board
have it.
meetings are still set for the second Thursday of every month at 10 a.m.
Okay, thank you.
We just
Yep.
don't have the
And then,
dates and list format, which we can have that immediately.
No, she has it. It was in there. I printed.
Oh,
it
what?
out.
Yeah, it was sent in the November meeting packet. I can resend to everyone.
we did also, one last thing on the report of agency council, we did receive a letter from the school district that was sent to the chair. We can provide it to everybody, and whether you want a response or not, you can let me know. I could draft something up.
Well, I mean, I think I've spoken to you about responding, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't think it should just be left
Yep.
out there that we need to close the loop. We had some conversation about that today in closed session, but we do need to close the loop,
Yep.
right?
Okay, we can
So I
prepare a response.
absolutely believe we prepare a response and we move forward.
Sure. Great. All right,
Is there a motion? Now we're ready?
to adjourn,
Move to adjourn.
Dr. Moore, second, all in favor? Meeting's over. See you Thursday.
Thank you.